Take your key fob and push the button. Key fob. I thought maybe the battery died. Keep it.
I'll be back to the office. I know, and those down. So I thought make sure we're signed into Kahoot. We're gonna get going on in a second. I haven't taken them 16 week course. Maybe 2 years. They've all been 9 week courses. It's so but I don't know if I can take the week courses. It's too much. We took care of the 9 weeks. And then I draw my program. I was at OU for radiology, to their radiology program. And and over half the class months ago, but the day they were drinking. Yeah, I've been having a lot later than that. He was having, shout out that. We just call him James.
Sorry, make sure we're logged in.
James was a good person, so we do that. I would go to the first evening. I'm studying.
Sorry, I had an email that I needed to answer. So just a little bit of a reminder, I had multiple students from, at least two from this section and students from other sections as well. If you guys know you're going to be missing an exam, you need to let me know as soon as you know, or as soon as it's reasonable for that when you know. What I mean is missing the exam and not letting me know until after you've missed the exam is not appropriate. So especially if you're like, if you miss the exam, there's an emergency, it's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is if you're sick that morning and you don't feel like coming, that you're going to make it to the exam, you don't email me until after the exam is done, or until I email you asking why you missed the exam. That's not appropriate. And so I'm just going to say, I know some of you guys got accepted into the nursing program. I can still email them and tell them that you're unprofessional. FYI. Okay, this isn't high school. So we got to treat this like we are adults and that you're going into an adult field where we're expected to be professional and adults and keep up with ourselves. So I'm not saying that was you, but I am saying like, hey, I heard that so-and-so just didn't show up to the exam and then emailed the professor later. That's totally fine. And like, I'm making, accommodations for people and everything like that, but I'm just saying like moving forward, I don't feel like I should have to let you guys know, like, hey, if you know you're going to miss the exam, shoot me an email as soon as you know you're going to miss the exam, even if it's like right before the exam or whatever. And I've even had a student in this class who had like a bathroom emergency and emails me from the bathroom. That's more appropriate, right? That's an appropriate sort of thing. Like, I'm coming, I'm going to be 15 minutes late. I'm having a moment right now. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you let me know. And so that's more appropriate, but like waiting until like, I have emailed, like you didn't show up to the exam, people have submitted the exam and now aren't you? Oh yeah, I had a doctor's appointment. What do you mean? So that is what I'm talking about. So be communicative, because like I said, this is not high school, this is college, and that sort of stuff might affect you, and it might affect your, the nursing program's willingness to work with you on things as well, if they hear about that. So just saying that as a general reminder of professionalism. Because those things to me indicate to me like, okay, well, if you can't even tell me that, you're going to miss my class and whatever, again, I'm going to be looking at you when you walk into my room and you're supposed to be treating me and being like, can I have the charge nurse, please? And I'll tell the charge nurse why I'm asking for another nurse. Because that's what we're looking at there. You know what I mean? So that sort of stuff, it matters. And my perception of it, as well as the nursing program's perception of it, as well as me less than other professors. That this has been an issue this semester. Like I've never had this happen in any other semester my entire career. Have students not contact me about missing an exam until after I contact them about missing an exam. So again, if you have an emergency, that's a different situation. But if you're like, oh, I had a doctor's appointment and you just didn't show up to the exam and I'm emailing you and you're telling me, oh yeah, I had a doctor's appointment. Like, what do you mean? You couldn't email me and let me, you knew you had the doctor's appointment at least 24 hours beforehand, probably. Or at least a couple hours beforehand. So you couldn't email me. Like that is unprofessional. That's what I mean. Obviously it's an emergency. Obviously if you are, unable to email me, that's not what I'm talking about. Okay. So yes, or if you have a bathroom situation, which we all get stressed out and have those moments. So I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about if you knew within a couple hours, you're going to miss it. It's also not appropriate when I have so many announcements and reminders about the exam to forget about the exam, because we had that happen as well. Never happened in any other semester that I've ever taught. And I've had that as well as a student, like, oh yeah, I had a doctor's appointment during that time. And they had a doctor's note, but what do you? Communication is what I'm asking for. So just communication. So FYI. So if you are of the mindset like, oh, you missed the exam and you think that that is just cool to just let me figure that out. I understand that happens sometimes. We have life and it gets in our way and we might actually like, oh no, I overslept or your alarm didn't go off. And you email me and I'll say like, we've got another exam later in the day. You can meet there. And I did let that student meet that other exam and take the exam. what should I have and stuff like, that's what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like, whose responsibility was it to be at the exam and to communicate it with me and stuff like that. So, anyways, just be aware of that. Not saying it's any of you. Okay. But I'm just saying, if you hear about it and that you think that might be okay, I'm just gonna let you guys know that it is not, right? Yes, so communication is what I'm looking for there. Okay. Especially if it happens more than once. So I understand if it happens once, yeah, and I'm gonna give a little bit of leeway, but if it happens for every exam, then we've got 3 more exams left. Yes, we've got unit 3, the lab final, and the final for lecture. We've got 3 more exams left. So be mindful of those dates. I did send out a reminder about the lab final. So we got that, and it's like a lot of bold and a lot of highlights and a lot of red and everything like that, just so that we're clear that we have the lab final on the Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. We also have presentations on that Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. So if you have a plane ticket or something like that, and you can prove to me that you have to miss that Tuesday, then I would say, okay, we'll reschedule you to take it with one of my other classes on Monday. Or if you can show me, like, Uncle Billy has been dying, XYZ, I really need to be there that week or whatever, and then I'll work with you. You talk to me. If you know, you want to switch a day with somebody with the presentation, as long as everybody's not switching to get off of Thanksgiving week, and you can switch with somebody, they'll take Thanksgiving week, and we still have the pacing out on the number of people on each day. That's fine stuff. I'm not too worried about it. So you can find somebody that you can switch with. I'm not going to find that person for you, okay? But you can contact me. You have the list of everybody that's presenting on every day, and you want to switch with somebody for a different day. You communicate that with them and then email me that you have made that decision. That's okay. I'm not picky about that. Okay. But lab final is on that Tuesday. There was a survey, and when I've talked about this survey to other students, and they look at me like, what survey are you talking about? Because I never saw this. We have something like, well, we have several thousand students at OSU OKC right now, right? And we had 70 of them respond to the survey. 70. And the survey went out to everybody. And some of these changes affect you. And so there was not very much participation in the survey. And the reason I'm bringing it up is there was a question that I had put on that survey, which had to do with Thanksgiving break, which it was a question that asked, would we rather have part off with fall break and then part off for Thanksgiving, or would you rather have all of Thanksgiving break off, but no fall break? And so the general consensus was to keep things, it was 50-50. Half of the 70 students that responded wanted to keep it the way it was, and half of them wanted to change it to full Thanksgiving off. And so they are keeping it the way that it is. We're keeping fall break and half of the week for Thanksgiving. So we are required to have butts in seats on Mondays and Tuesdays because of that. If you are somebody with kids, you will understand why this is an issue, because kids have off all of Thanksgiving week. And so that's why I was trying to change it, was to try to accommodate those scheduled for people who have kids. And I'm betting that most of the 70 people that responded didn't have kids, because they probably had time to look at a survey that had like 100 questions on it or something like that. So anyways, so that could have been changed and it wasn't, and that isn't just on you, it's also on faculty. Faculty voted to have it changed. Staff voted to keep it the way that it was. And so because staff voted to keep it the way that it was, and faculty was, I want to say like 60-40 on the decision, and then students were 50-50, they decided to keep it the way that it was. So it ended up being pretty much administration's decision. So it is what it is. So I'm not going to lie, I was thankful for fall break also. I know we were thankful for fall break, but it also means that I have to keep butts in seats on Monday and Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. And so there is they're getting a lot more strict about that, like how much time we spend in person. And so when I let you guys out of lab early, which we talked about it before, like, hey, like I'm not supposed to let you guys out of lab early and stuff like that, like they are keeping tabs on that stuff a lot more. Now you might have other professors who, like, I've had several classes where they're going to give me off for Thanksgiving. Like, what are you talking about? Then my question to you will be, are they tenured? I'm not. So I can't live that lush life where I do whatever I want. I've only been here for 4 years. Even though I'm very active in trying to change policies and rules and things like that, I don't get that sort of leeway in my classes until I've been here for 7 years and get tenure. I'm not worried about getting tenure. I know I'll get it when my time comes. But it's also one of the things that until I get there, I have to abide by those rules, and I can get called out and get in trouble from them. So with lab and stuff, I'm a little bit more you know, lenient on that, but on Thanksgiving holidays, that they have literally had years of discussion on changing this. And the fact that it got turned down and it was my policy, that I'm not gonna get away with giving you those days off. It would call too much attention to it. So, that's good. It's good timing for the lab exam. But again, if you have a reasonable excuse that you need me to accommodate you to have you take the test before or after Thanksgiving, then we'll work it out. But it's not going to be like, hey, I really wanted to spend time with my family in Ada on Tuesday. I would just be like, well, I'm sorry, but it's a close enough drive that I'm going to have to say that you're going to have to be there on the same day. Because I have to have butts and that sort of stuff. So it has to deal with your credit hours and stuff like that and how it's calculated. I don't know how much you guys have heard about this, but OSU LKC is under very strict scrutinization for not, you don't basically complying with HLC, which is the Higher Learning Commission accreditation board. There's a lot of stuff that we are not taking boxes on. And so that's one of them is butts and seats. And so it's not just a question of like, we're trying to be strict to be strict. It's a question of we're trying to be strict so we can keep accreditation. Imagine if the nursing program lost accreditation. It would, nobody's degree would matter at all. And so that's what we're trying to protect there. That's how it's changing. Some of that stuff affects you. Is anybody in here in SGA, student government? Okay, so how many years have you been in student government? You just started. Okay, so you don't know a lot about a lot of this. We had a lot of changes in student life, hiring and personnel and stuff like that. Another thing that I've been working on is trying to get SGA to actually participate in the committee meetings that we have, including faculty senate and other committees, because there's a lot of changes that happen on this campus that faculty are making these choices for you and no students are participating at all in the discussion. And there's something called shared governance, and part of that shared governance compliance is that we're supposed to have student representation in the committees. It's not necessarily SGA's fault as representatives of the student body that they're not participating. It is more or less like the staff leadership of student life hasn't been making them participate. And so I have a policy that I've also been putting in place, which is trying to get tuition waivers for SGA people who actually participate in committee meetings. That if you participate, if we have good representation, 75% or greater at committee meetings from at least one SGA representative, then the SGA people are eligible for tuition waivers. It'd be great. Now what to do is come to the meetings. Many of the meetings only happen once a month. It's not like we have them all. So, huh?
You know, in the next meeting.
Well, it just depends on the committees. So we have several committees, but like if we could have at least one student at each committee, because some of these things like they literally affect you and how your experience is here, how you're charged for things, how classes are run, everything like that. And faculty are making these choices for you and they think that they know what you want. I'm telling you that they do not. And I actually think sometimes I'll think I want to make a change for the benefit of the students. And then I talk to the students. I'm like, oh, they don't want this change. Never mind. Like, it's quite obvious to me that they don't, or they want to change the opposite way of how I'm going to change it. So having students involved in some of that stuff is really important. When there was some changes like that, like there was a big discussion of whether students should be allowed to have children in classrooms. As it is stated right now, there is a rule in the academic policies handbook that states that students are not allowed to bring children to classrooms, period. Like that's a rule. And many faculty are allowing students to bring their children like to Comp 1 or something like that. Like we understand that sometimes the schedule, calls that my kid is quiet, they'll be on an iPad in the back of the room. And the faculty of those classes tend to be like, I'd like to be able to make that choice for my classroom. So we formed a committee, we'll call task force, to try to see if we wanted to change the rule. The problem is, have you guys ever been in a classroom where somebody brings their kid sometimes and you have been distracted sometimes and you just don't say anything because you're nice and you're considerate and you don't want to cause? That's the problem, is that you're paying thousands of dollars to attend this class and that you end up being distracted, but you're not actually telling the professor that. So I had this discussion with these faculty members that were fighting very strongly for that. I was going to change it to allow it. But then when I talked to the students, I found out, no, we have a lot of students that are actually distracted by that and would rather not be.
Do they not have a daycare center on campus?
We used to, and they closed it. Okay. And so that's another issue, right? For that, how many students do we have that have kids that could make use of that daycare?
Well, other than that, faculty.
Yes, and faculty too. And so they had it and it wasn't being used. And so that's the other thing, is that they did have it because students were asking for it, faculty were asking for it too. And it just wasn't being used. So anyways, we came up with a policy that would allow you to have your kids on campus go to your faculty meetings. You could bring your kid one-on-one to a one-on-one faculty meeting, but just not into the classrooms. And because we had enough faculty that really wanted the option to make the choice, it got vetoed, and now the administration is going to make the rule for that. We don't get a say anymore. And so there's just stuff like that where it's very bureaucratic, because like we have some people that disagree, some people like you can't. It's like one word. It's just like the government. One word of a policy doesn't work for somebody, and then different groups will vote for whatever.
We have a meeting on Thursday for SGA, and we can bring this up to them.
That's not up for debate anymore. It's already been done.
Well,
So
what about sitting in on the monthly meetings?
That, yes. So I've emailed SGA and I've emailed, let me see. I've emailed SGA and I've emailed Student Life and I've emailed the financial aid director about the tuition waiver thing for attending the meetings. So that email has been sent out. I think the issue is really on the staff side now, because we had major turnover in staffing lately. So I think that's what the issue is with that. But as far as when our next meeting is, I can email you guys with the next faculty senate meeting. So if we could at least have participation in faculty senate, which meets the first Thursday of every single month, always, like that one's always a predictable one. If during the regular school semesters, fall and spring, we always meet every Thursday. And so having representation there, where we're starting to work on policies and stuff like that. Now they talk a lot about faculty policies too, which won't affect you guys, but I am the chair of the Academic Policies and Student Affairs Subcommittee for Faculty Senate. So I chair that committee. So changes that we make in my committee literally affect how faculty and students interact in academics. We don't have any active policies right now, or I would be engaging with you guys about it. But one of them that I am working on is that one. That's the only one. I try to get tuition waivers for that. Some of the stuff is stepwise, and some of the stuff is like when a problem gets brought up. And if you guys feel like you have a problem, reach out to me. If there's something that you want changed about policy or something like that, and you want it worked on, bring it to me and I will do the legwork to see if it's something that the system wants, or something that just nursing wants, and I need to talk to nursing or whatever. So if you guys have issues like that, I'll be happy to do the legwork for that if you bring it up with me. Make sense? Anyways, I got way off track with that. So that's why we're having class on Tuesday is my point. Yes.
If this organization was ever at risk of losing their accreditation, would we be notified beforehand? How might that work?
That's up to the administration themselves. So we are right now, Stillwater is under review by HLC, which they're having meetings this November with HLC about changes that HLC is making to requirements for accreditation, which we don't have a lot of say over what happens with Stillwater. That's just facts. Stillwater makes a lot of choices for us that we don't get a choice about. And so whatever Stillwater is doing with HLC, it's gonna come down to us and we'll have to comply with it or whatever. Right now we're being under review for a lot of things. I don't know if you guys know this, but a lot changed with COVID. Before COVID, online classes weren't that common. And now how often do you see hybrid or online classes? And are they actually being managed in an effective way that actually allows you to learn properly? And so that's all we have requirements on what you're supposed to meet. The Department of Education had made a lot of these requirements. So the Department of Education, which I'm sure you've heard, is like, not real anymore, according to our government now. But HLC made guidelines based on the Department of Education's requirement for something called RSI, which is regular and substantive interaction, which means if you take an online class or a class that's 75% or more online, that you have to have weekly interactions, you have to have personalized feedback, you have to have certain things that you have to tick boxes on that's actually going to force engagement. How many of you guys have had online classes that's pretty much fully automated? Yeah, inappropriate. There's actually guidelines from the government that said that that's not allowed. And so we're getting dinged for that. And so several universities might be, but we are definitely getting dinged for that. And so that stuff is being changed. And it isn't the faculty's fault. It's the administration. We've had a lot of turnover in presidents. We've had a lot of turnover. I don't know if you guys know that, but we used to have, anybody take a music appreciation with Scott Newman? He used to be the president of OSU. There's a reason why he now teaches music appreciation. Just saying. Okay. There are of OSU, OKC. I want to be clear about that. We've had a president after. He outed himself about it.
He touts himself about being the former president.
Yeah. Yeah. He should not be bragging. There's a reason why he is not anymore. If he was good at it, he would still be, right? You think he makes more as music appreciation teacher? So you shouldn't be bragging about that. We all know that as faculty. Anyways, we had another president after him, and we don't have a president now. Wonder why that is. Because none of them were doing their jobs. So we now have a provost that was instilled upon us, Rhonda Vanderslice. She was instilled upon us by Stillwater. She's from Stillwater. And she has cleaned house at OSU IT. And she's cleaning house here too. So we've had a lot of turnover and a lot of changes happening because we're in compliance with HLC, and we might lose accreditation if we don't. We're under review. We will be under review for the next few years. Probably it's like a 5-year process. So if there was a risk there, and I doubt that it would be, because we're making a lot of positive changes to meet HLC. If there was, I'm hoping that that would be communicated to you guys before that was an issue for you guys. But yeah, we're making the changes. It's just a matter of you can't make changes in academia overnight.
So basically, this
Yeah.
isn't gonna really technically affect us.
I hope not. Yeah, I'll put it that way. It's a really big deal. I can't understate how big a deal this is. So yeah.
Sounds like all right, steps are getting made towards.
For you guys going into nursing program right now, in the next couple of years, it shouldn't affect you. Okay. But the changes that are being made to accommodate this stuff will affect you probably in the next year or two. You'll see those changes come and trickling down in classes that you're taking, especially anything that was based online. You'll see more interaction from your professors and stuff like that. If you guys were taking my hybrid class right now, you would see that my interaction with you in my hybrid class would be about the same as it is in person, because I've gone out of my way. My hybrid class doesn't have to meet those standards because it's not 75% online, it's only 50% online. But I still met those standards, and I always have, because I was like, why would you not want to if it's supposed to help the students do better in the class, right? But people are lazy, right? So that's just the bottom line. So this is cracking down on laziness is really what it is. OSU OKC is also at risk of losing tenure. So that's another thing that we're trying to fight to preserve, which might not matter. It doesn't matter to you guys. But I'm telling you, the only reason that some of the professors are as good as they are here is because we offer tenure at a 2-year institution. We're the only one in the entire state that does that. And so if we lose tenure, we're going to lose the professors that are teaching here that are decent, like Freeman Ainsworth, or some other people that are very, very taking Freeman's classes. Okay. But, or Alyssa Nephew, or some of these people that really stand up for students and really do a lot for the students and whatever. And if they lose tenure, like we will lose professors of that caliber. The only reason I came here is because they offer tenure. I would not stay here if they took away my opportunity to get tenure. I'm just being honest. So, if you don't understand what tenure is, it's basically like, once I get to tenure, I can give you Thanksgiving week off. Once I get to tenure, I can give you more extra credit. Once I get to tenure, I can bend the rules and make it more, happy for you without having to be stuck on these stricture things. And so what I see tenure as my opportunity to serve my students better. Some professors see tenure as an opportunity to not have to change and build and whatever. So it's not always a good thing, but largely, generally speaking, most people, if you're getting tenure. Anyways, I could go on and on about this. I can't tell you guys, I'm very, very involved in a lot of these changes, and I feel like some of these changes do directly impact you. And so what I am asking for is just more interaction with representatives of the student population. Any student, by the way, is always welcome to attend any of those committee meetings. If you're ever interested, if there's ever one that's coming up that has information that I feel like might be interesting to you, like some of it's just not, I'll be honest, okay? But if there's ever anything that I really definitely feel like would be interesting to you, you might want to attend this meeting, I'll let you know. But right now they're doing a lot of changes with faculty. And so that doesn't really interest me that much. But yeah. All right, we're going to do this thing. Are we ready? Make sure we're signed in. Gosh. Yeah, you guys think I'm busy enough with this class. I have a lot of background stuff that I work on. I represent the School of STEM on Faculty Senate. So I pull my weight, let me tell you. We're signed in, everybody, just double check it. We will have, our first person is Cora, I think. All right, what is decontamination? All right, is Cora online? I think she is, yes. All right, Cora, your question is gonna be, what is sterilization? So we've got decontamination. We've got sterilization. Let's see, Emma is my next person after that. What is disinfection for Emma? Disinfection. All right, so there's a lot of terms in this chapter. I will say that 11 and 12 are very flashcardy chapters, very flashcardy, and there's a lot of information. I get a question from a lot of my students like, man, chapter 12 has a lot of different antibiotics. Do we really have to know all those? Yes. Okay. Okay. So, and if you think that that is an issue, then you're going to have a rough time with pharmacology in nursing. Okay. All right. So here we have decontamination, mechanical removal of microbes from inanimate surfaces. And often this can also apply to like filtration. So if you filter something, we're removing the microbes from the solution. We're not doing anything to like kill them. We're not doing anything to like, chemically treat them or anything. We're literally just removing them from that situation. And often whenever we're washing our hands, there's two things going on. The suds themselves can be disrupting the membranes, which we'll talk about in the chemical stuff, but also the suds themselves are helping to occlude them and remove them. So often, like something like a surfactant, we have multiple aspects of removing the microbe physically as well as affecting them chemically. So some of this stuff can cross over on other things. So decontamination is mechanical removal, like actually removing them out of that situation. That would include filtration or even just like sweeping a floor. That could be decontamination, or using just water or wet wipe to like wipe off, something on a surface. Now, is that going to be as effective as using soap or something like that? No, of course, but it still counts in that situation. Yes.
So like, what does Lysol do?
So Lysol does both. We'll have mechanical. So if you're like, if you take a Lysol wipe, right, it'll help you mechanically remove the microbes from the surface, but it also has chemicals in it that will help affect the stability of the microbes chemically, whether it's their membranes or their proteins. And often Lysol has more than one chemical in it that has several effects.
So does it kill them?
It does, yes. So 99, what does it say, like 99.9% of all microbes? And what do you think the 0.1% type of microbe is for that actually survives it? Endospores, okay, yeah, endospores. So we're getting to that, right? Yes. All right, so Cora says sterilization is removing all microbial life from a surface, and this is true. This includes the endospores. If we're sterilizing, we're removing the endospores, right? Lysol doesn't sterilize, right? We know that because 99.9% isn't 100%. So things that can sterilize might be things like autoclaving or incineration, things like that. All things, including endospores, should be eliminated with sterilization processes. So Emma, what is disinfection? Yeah, so it is, I would say, we have different levels of how we're achieving it, and then also definitions that apply to the mechanism. So if we're mechanically removing the microbes, that's decontamination. If we're using physical or chemical methods to kill microbes or break them down, that's disinfection. But also disinfection, another key thing about disinfection, we're removing most of the microbes. If we're killing all of them, then take it to the next level with sterilization. But disinfection is not all, it's most. So that's what the disinfectant that we use in our lab, it's a disinfectant because we're not getting rid of endospores with it, right? If we were doing something that eliminated endospores, it'd probably kill you too. Yeah, I mean, quite literally, honestly, because they're hardier than you are. So we don't want to be sterilizing those sorts of things. That's why we say in surgical operating theaters or whatever, is the whole situation entirely 100% sterile? It's impossible. But are we trying to get it as close to sterility as possible? Yeah, of course. And so we use a variety of methods in a surgical operating theater to try to keep things as sterile as possible. Many of the things in there are actually sterile, like the operating instruments. They should be actually sterile, or the disposable items in there should be actually sterile. If we're using plastic disposables, like what we use with IVs and things like that, the actual bags that we're using with the IVs and the solutions that are inside the IV bags, the actual needles on the IVs, that sort of stuff, that's been sterilized. But can we autoclave with high heat and steam and everything like that plastic? No, because it would melt from the heat, right? So how do we actually sterilize those things? Cold sterilization. And when we use for cold sterilization, ionizing radiation. I promise you, you interact with radiated things on a daily basis. If you have ever opened a thing that had like a paper side and a plastic side, and you peel them apart and open and you get a plastic thing out of it, that was irradiated with ionizing radiation. And that's how it was sterilized. And many of the foods and things like that we eat, if it doesn't have cells in it, if it doesn't have like chicken and stuff like that, like actual living cells in it, many of the food powders and things like that were also irradiated. Those things were treated to make them sterile, so they'll last on the shelves for like ever. So you probably interact with irradiated things a lot more and depend on radiation a lot more than you probably realize. Keep that stuff sterile. It's pretty cool stuff. So that's what chapter 11 is really getting into. So we've got those. Good job, ladies. We got Emma, we got Cora. Did I ask somebody else a good question? Like I did and didn't. Okay, so beautiful. Okay, next person will be Brandon. Let's go into our next question. I'll see if I can get you a question. What is asepsis for everybody? Brandon, you're going to give me an example of asepsis. All right, so asepsis is removal of microbes from an animate or living tissue. Okay, all right, so Brandon, what's an example of that? I have a lot that you guys probably don't even think about as applying. So if asepsis is the removal of microbes from a living tissue or living surface, right? And the chemicals that we use to achieve that, we call them antiseptics. Could you give me an example of that?
Wipes,
Yeah.
antiseptic wipes.
Sure, like antiseptic wipes. Obvious one that you guys know, and you probably don't think about a lot, is the alcohol wipes to prep for IVs or for tube sticks. That's asepsis. Iodine we use as an aseptic. Yep. So we're using it to prep on the actual patient's body. So iodine, before we're doing like a C-section or doing surgery, stuff like that, laparoscopic, we'll usually prep the area with iodine. And so, of course, now we're getting into that's an aseptic application of a halogen, right? And so some of the chemical groups that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. So good job. Good job. All right. What was your name?
Gracie.
Okay, Gracie, of course. Somebody say your name, like when somebody says you guys' name or when I have to call on you, I see your faces, but then when I see your faces, the names don't always come. My brain doesn't work that way. All right. What does it mean if a method is microbicidal? Oh, you guys know that. We talked about this one before. Okay, our next person is Lily. Is Lily here? Lily, here, Lily. Okay, so my question for you, Lily, will be what is microbistatic? So when we get to that. So microbicidal is when we're killing the microbes. Microbistatic, what would that mean? Stops the growth, right? So we learned about this with the Kirby Bauer. It's the same exact term. It's the same term. So if it's cidal, it kills it. If it's static, it just keeps it from growing. It stops it from growing, but didn't really kill it. So some chemicals or some physical methods can be those as well. It doesn't always have to apply only to antibiotics. Any microbial control method that would apply to. So good job. Let's see, let's go on. Next question. Select all that apply. Which of the following sterilizes? Really? All right, Barry, you're going to be my next person. All right. I can tell some people haven't actually watched the lecture, because if you had, then you would definitely know, because I say it very loud and clearly in the lecture, that boiling does not sterilize. So I know this was a popular choice for a lot of people, so we might not have many people that know this one. So I'm just going to ask this one as a general question and see if somebody can answer. Why does boiling not sterilize? Anybody know? Well, yeah, well, the water wouldn't be sterile, right? And so if you were out like hiking, let's say, and you want to boil your water, now that water boiling might kill most of the microbes in it. And but is it going to kill all of them? No, and I'm telling you that it doesn't. It does not. Okay. So anybody have an idea why that is or what's going on there? Honey. The endospores. And it, yes,
And then.
yes, they're hardy. Yes, and so there was a guy that figured this out. Like basically, if you boil water, the cells will just turn into endospores. And the endospores that were already existing in the sample will survive the boiling. You can just boil forever and ever for 10 years straight, and those endospores will just stay dormant that whole time. It's not hot enough to actually kill the endospores in the endospore state. It's not. It only gets 100 degrees Celsius. And that's not hot enough to actually kill the endospores as endospores. But what they realized is if you boil water at boiling temperature and then let it cool for a few hours and then boil it again after those endospores have woken up and you're like, oh, it's safe to come out, guys. They wake up again. And then you boil it again for 30 minutes. And then you do that like 3 or 4 times. If you reach actual boiling temperatures that way, you can sterilize. And that process is called tyndallization. Okay? It's not the same thing as pasteurization. Okay? Pasteurization never reaches boiling temperatures. Remember, boiling is 100 degrees Celsius for water. Okay? So pasteurization stays below that. It gets maybe 60 to 70 degrees Celsius, which is still hot for us. We would not do well at those temperatures, right? But pasteurization keeps it at a temperature low enough to maintain the stability of whatever the liquid is. Like, what's an example, Barry, of something that we pasteurize regularly? Sure, yes. So milk is the most obvious one. I feel like a lot of us know that. So we don't want to disrupt the proteins and everything that's in milk. Milk has good stuff in it. We want to keep milk, right? But we want to get rid of the potential pathogens that are in milk. Now, when you pasteurize milk, does it sterilize it? No. And I feel like that's obvious, right? Because if it was sterile, it would last on the shelf indefinitely. But it doesn't. Even if you don't open that milk, does it go bad? Yeah, because there's still microbes in it. So the next time that somebody tells you that drinking raw milk is better for you because the microbes are still in there, remind them that there are still microbes in pasteurized milk. We've just gotten rid of the pathogens, most of them too. There might still be 1 or 2, but there's an acceptable level of risk associated with pasteurized things. Anybody in here ever drink Brahms milk? Okay. Any of you guys that drink Brahms milk prefer Brahms milk? Okay, why? Because it tastes better? Why do you think it tastes better? It's ultra pasteurized. So it's been treated even more at higher temperatures more frequently. And so it lasts longer because we're removing more of the microbes, less are left behind. And so it'll last on the shelf for a lot longer, about a month, I think. If you guys have ever had Lactaid or lactose-free milks, they're also ultra pasteurized. I don't drink a lot of milk, guys, okay? I don't like the way it tastes. And so with milk, basically, the way that it goes with milk is you pasteurize it and you're removing most of the microbes there, and some of them are left behind. You actually can taste them and the products that they make, like their waste products and things like that in the milk. Don't think about it until you've tasted Brahms milk and you're like, oh, it's so fresh tasting. It tastes cleaner and it tastes like milk. It doesn't taste like yucky in with the milk. And lactate's the same way, but in order to remove the lactose in it, which they do with enzymes, they also have to treat the milk ultra pasteurized even more. And like I said, I don't drink a lot of milk. I might have a bowl of cereal once a month. Or if I have milk, I have it to put in my coffee because I have black coffee with a splash of milk in it. That's how I drink my coffee. And that's what I keep milk around for. So I don't go through a lot of milk. I don't have kids either. It's just me and my husband. So when I buy milk, I buy the lactose-free milk because I'm not even kidding. It lasts for months, multiple months after you open it. And I keep it in the fridge, to be clear. I don't keep it like on a shelf or something, right? But it doesn't go bad. For actual months, it'll be fine. So that's the difference that pasteurization can make. And do you think I'm missing nutrients from pasteurizing it? No. So don't let anybody convince you into thinking that there's benefits to drinking unpasteurized stuff. Beautiful. I don't like Brahms. That's fine. If you don't like it, you don't like it. Yes. So yeah. So if you don't like eating at Brahms, what I found too is that because Brahms they don't treat a lot of their products like their beef products. They use a different kind of beef. They use different kinds of cattle. And so if your body's not used to those types of things, then it can actually literally affect your GI system. So that's true. If you don't eat a lot of Brahms, And that can actually literally physically make you sick because they have different kinds of beef. It's like when you go to another country and you get sick, it's not because it's actually got sick germs in it, but it's sick germs to you. Your body's just not acclimated to that stuff. It's like if a vegetarian suddenly ate a burger, they'd probably get sick. Their body's not acclimated to it. So it's just that sort of stuff. You just whatever. Yeah. So if you don't like it, you don't like it, and your body doesn't like it, your body doesn't like it. I'm not judging you, believe me. Okay. So yes, we clear on that. So pasteurization keeps it below boiling, but we cycle through warm temperatures, close to boiling temperatures for short periods of time. We're talking like 60 seconds or something. And then we cool it down for 60 seconds. And then we heat it up for 60 seconds. And we cool it down for 60 seconds. And there's longer intervals that we can heat it or cool it, depending on the liquid and how stable it might be and exposure and what temperature or whatever. But anytime you're using sub-boiling temperatures and you're cycling between that higher sub-boiling and then cool to try to manage microbes, that's pasteurization. But if you're consciously, I'm going to boil it this amount of time, actually boil it and then cool it for this amount of time and then boil it again to kill off the endospores, that's tyndallization. So they are different things. Okay, cool. All right, so dry oven and incineration. Whenever we are incinerating something, we are actually physically changing like the covalent bonds. So we're not just using heat to separate our hydrogen bond attractions anymore. We're heating it up enough that we're actually breaking covalent bonds. So when you burn something, when you incinerate or cook something in a dry oven long enough, that incineration actually breaks down your CHO molecules into water, which will turn into steam in the fire, or into carbon dioxide, or even oxygen and stuff like that will be given off. Where you used to be glucose, and you used to be proteins, and you used to be DNA. Now you're just gases being given off because we've literally broken you down so much. That's what incineration does. And what couldn't be turned into gases turns into ash. And so that's how incineration works. So it's actual chemical change that is going on there. So there is something that can resist even incineration, and that's prions. So prions can even resist incineration. And I don't mean full-blown to ash incineration. What I mean is like cooking your meat on a stove, even if it's well done, isn't enough to denature a prion. And prions can actually survive that. So that's what the issue was with mad cow disease, with the outbreak in the 90s in England and Europe, was that they were cooking their meat, even well done burgers. But that cow, if it had the prion survived that, and then it causes the proteins in the brain to change. And if you think we're not still dealing with that, I got to remind you, there's a reason why they ask you the question when you donate blood about did you travel to Europe between these years? And if you did, you can't donate blood ever because of mad cow disease. They're still having cases of people having gotten it even now. So, I mean, it's not something that you like get mad cow disease and within a few months you have it. We're talking, you can go 30, 40, 50 years without signs or symptoms. And then once you have signs or symptoms, most people die within 1 to 2 months with that. So it's pretty interesting how it works. Again, those are just misfolded proteins. Full-blown incineration to ash would save you from that, but you can't cook your meat to ash and then eat the ash and get nutrients from it. So that didn't help with the reason why it was spreading. The other issue is with prions is that autoclaving, traditional autoclaving at 120 degrees, 121 degrees Celsius at 15 PSI. So that's adding pressure so you can raise the temperature of the water. And so it doesn't boil at 100, it boils at 121. So now we're hotter than what water usually can get. And so getting that will remove endospores and pretty much every other pathogen you'll see, but it won't kill prions. For prions, you have to get to 135 degrees Celsius. And so with the moist heat. And the moist heat we've learned, if you read the chapter and did your notes properly, what does the moisture help do? Why do we need the more? Why is it that I can heat something at just 121 degrees Celsius? It depends on the instrument, right? So if I can heat something at 121 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes and it sterilizes it, but if I add moisture into it, it'll sterilize it. And if I don't have the moisture, it takes 6 hours to sterilize it. It's more efficient. So yes, so the moisture helps with the penetration or I want to say this, yes and no, okay? So if I have a bowl and I put it in an autoclave, and we raise the pressure of it so that we can get it to 121 degrees Celsius. And I use steam. The steam helps attach to the surfaces, and it's something about the moisture is actually making it work better. And we do talk about in the chapter what it is about the moisture. Yes, Braylee.
Isn't that just a form of transferring?
Not really, because if I put that same bowl in an oven at the same exact temperature, it has to go for 6 hours. Why is that not transferring? Yes. Let's see if we can get it.
It does, the microcycle effect is coagulation and denaturation of
Yes.
proteins.
The water helps with denaturing the proteins. So that's key. And that comes up a lot in this chapter because it's also the reason why 70% alcohol works better than 100% alcohol, because the water helps it coagulate the proteins. So that water and having those polar bonds, being able to interact with other things that are charged, that water helps coagulate proteins. And if you have coagulation of proteins and denaturation from the heat, it's more effective at controlling microbes. If you only have denaturation from the heat, and you don't have the water helping coagulate the proteins, it's going to take longer exposure to the heat. So dry heat, you need higher temperatures to treat effectively or longer periods of time. So that was another concept I was talking about in this chapter, was the thermal death time and the thermal death point. So thermal death time is how much time you have to be at a temperature in order to sterilize. So if you're at 50 degrees Celsius, then you're gonna have to be there for a longer period of time. If you're at 121 degrees Celsius, then you have to be there less time, right? 20 minutes. Now, if you get, depending on whether there's moisture or heat, so that will look at the specific method. For this method, how much time to sterilize at this temperature. The thermal death point is, for this method, at what temperature do you have to be at to sterilize in 10 minutes? So it's a specific time frame there, literally 10 minutes for the thermal death point. At what temperature do you have to be at for this method to sterilize in 10 minutes? So that's those differences on what those terms mean. Okay. Let's see what else. I think we're good. Let's move on. Good job. Try to get to where we can start talking about the antibiotics soon. All right, select all that apply. Which of the following sterilizes? What we just, oh, it's a different one. Okay, which of these sterilizes? This one can be a little tricky because one of them depends on. So Mariah just left, yes? She was going to be my next person. All right, Mikey, you'll be my next person. I'm going to have you tell me what type of radiation UV radiation is. All right, so it should be pretty straightforward. All right, so this is asking us which of these sterilizes. So autoclave sterilizes, I think most of us are familiar with that. It's commonly used, it uses pressure, heat, and moisture to sterilize. We put something in pressure, so that allows us to get the temperature up to 121 degrees with that moisture in there. If the moisture doesn't touch it, for example, if you have a sphere and you put it in an autoclave, and the moisture can't get, if it's a sealed sphere, and you can't get inside the sphere, the inside of it won't get sterilized. It doesn't work like that. All right, so that is the problem with autoclaving. So sometimes autoclaving isn't useful depending on what the shape of that object is or whatever. Autoclaving might also not be useful if you're a metal instrument and you're sensitive to the moisture in the autoclave, because it relies on the moisture for its work. So you might rust or something like that.
So you said that like plastic would melt in autoclave, but
Some of them do, yes.
it could, and then the metals, because we would put them in like these sleeves and then tape them up. We'd reuse our sleeves.
Yes.
And stick them on.
Yes, so there's certain types of plastics that are resistant to autoclaving. Most plastics, even over time, will eventually break down from the autoclaving procedure. And so when that happens, we usually just throw the plastic out, because we used to use like reusable like plastic bottles and stuff like that in microbiology stuff. But certain types of plastics will survive it. Other types of plastic, like if you have like an IV line, like those thin little plastic lines that are actually the line that the fluid runs through, that would definitely almost certainly melt in an autoclave. So stuff like that might not be autoclavable. So what type of radiation is UV radiation, Mikey? Yeah, it's ultraviolet, but non-ionizing, that's what I'm looking for. Yes, so non-ionizing, that's fine. All right, y'all aren't paying attention. Hold on, Mikey, you guys. You guys, I'm glad you're on your stuff, but that's okay, I got you. All right, so it is non-ionizing. So let's see. Is Jessica here or online today? Let's see, not here in person. Is Jessica online? Yes, good job, Cora. So let's see what you guys are talking about. So Jessica, yes, Jessica. So my question for you will be, what is ionizing radiation? Ionizing. You can give me even a definition from the textbook is fine on that one. So I'll let you cook with that one a little bit. All right, so we talked about autoclaving and that, but radiation is something quite a lot different. And I'm not going to get into specifics of ionizing radiation yet. I'm going to let Jessica come up with her answer for that one. But the general idea of radiation is that you have energized molecules moving at things, and that it bombards the molecules and literally causes them to change somehow. So it's like putting energy into something. So we've already seen an example of how energy can affect molecules with photosynthesis. So when sunlight hit the pigment molecules in plant cells, it caused them to get excited and then shoot electrons through an electron transport chain. So those pigment molecules, lose electrons or gain electrons in association with the energy caused from light. We already know light is a type of radiation, yes, ultraviolet radiation. So light is traditionally seen as a non-ionizing type of radiation for most things. Yes. So high energy radiation that removes electrons from atoms, exactly. So, all right. So the idea with ionizing radiation. So you guys remember what ions are? Do you know what an ionic bond is? I know we've talked about that before. So in ionic bonds, the electron is being transferred, like somebody's stealing an electron from somebody in those bonds. And that was our example for it traditionally is going to be sodium and chloride, right? Yeah, you're fine. Okay, good. Because we'll have you're fine. Mariah, I'll have a question for you in a moment, okay? We'll come back to you with that. All right, so with ionizing radiation, the energy causes something to give up an electron. That's the general idea of it. And then we create an ion. So instead of sodium donating its electron to chloride in salt and making an ion that way, so sodium gets a plus, and then chloride got a negative, right? And that's what the ionic bond was between those. Instead of that, energy is causing a molecule to lose an electron. It's high enough energy that if I expose you to high enough levels of ionic radiation, that it's going to literally kill you if you're at high enough levels. And it can kill you within a matter of minutes to hours if you're at high enough levels. So if you are standing next to the reactor of Chernobyl, like right now, even though it happened back in '86, you can still go stand next to that reactor, and within hours of standing next to that elephant's foot where the actual meltdown happened, you would die within hours if you stood there without any protection on it. It's that strong. And it's so strong that it will continue to do that for decades and decades and decades still to come.
Is that because it damages your DNA?
Yes, it's literally sending enough energy in there that even your own DNA is becoming ionized. It's losing electrons, and those electrons get shot off and they damage other and break bonds and covalent bonds and stuff like that. So it's literally causing chemical damage to your cells and to your DNA. We know that radiation quite literally does this because we use it to target tumors. So tumors that are growing out of control, we can focus radiation at the tumor, and that will damage the DNA of the tumor so that it can't multiply anymore. Now, if you damage DNA of healthy cells, it can cause them to multiply too much. So it can kind of go one way or the other, depending on how the damage is doing. You see some of these stories of these people that open, you guys have seen it. What is it called? The doom core or whatever it is? The demon core or something like that. It was basically a beryllium sphere that decayed to uranium or something like that. And when they opened the lead chamber for it, all the radiation came out at once. And this guy, just from opening the core, you would see no change in the room. It would just look like somebody opened a box. But that radiation, just from that one little blip of, it got opened on accident. Okay? That radiation, the amount of radiation that person was exposed to, they could no longer multiply any of their cells to the point that their skin starts sloughing off and their organs stop sticking to each other, and they just start melting away as a person. And over a course of, they tried and tried and tried with life-supporting treatment to save this person. In the course of, a few weeks, this person basically melted away and died just from boop, boop exposure to radiation. So some types of radiation are so strong, it can destroy the human body like that. When we talk about Hiroshima, we talk about a bomb that is dropped on a city of people. We're talking about a sudden burst of release of radiation that is so strong that it atomizes people. It can be that strong. So when I'm talking to you and you think you're scared of an amount of radiation that could cause somebody to melt away their skin over weeks, Hiroshima was an amount of radiation. We're not talking about the fire didn't consume them. It's that instant release of the radioactive radiation, the gamma radiation that is released from that bomb in an instant that is atomizing people. Now that is ridiculous. So that's the type of energy that we're talking about here. Now, that's ionizing radiation. We can control it, we can focus it, we can control the strength of it. Are all types of ionizing radiation able to be blocked by lead? No. X-rays are weak types of ionizing radiation. We already know how much damage they can do to you over time. Marie Curie was proof of that. She didn't know about the effects of X-rays, and so she died of cancer years after starting her investigation into X-rays. And she was the one that was the mother of X-rays, right? We know about that. We know that about her. So she died of cancer because of her work with X-rays, because they didn't know that it caused cancer. How would they? Why would they know that? Because it was until years after exposure with X-rays that they started learning that it caused cancer. So it's wild to think about. So the X-rays are weak compared to gamma radiation. So gamma radiation is the type of radiation we're talking about being released by Hiroshima. But we can still use gamma radiation. When we talk about cold sterilization, that's using a certain amount of gamma radiation that doesn't release heat like the H-bomb does, okay? We're not talking about hydrogen bombs or anything like that at that point. But it releases controlled type of gamma radiation, and we can put things that are plastic and pass radiation through them, and it penetrates through it very well. And so you could have a complete total sphere of plastic, shoot radiation through it, and now you can get inside of that sphere, right? It's not going to be at risk of melting from heat. It's not going to be at risk of being not getting on the inside because the steam can't get to it, nothing like that. So we can use gamma radiation and ionizing radiation to penetrate surfaces. So that's a good thing that comes out of our knowledge about radiation there. The universe is constantly bombarding us with this type of radiation, by the way, all the time. So we're still, even right now, there's going to be radiation coming in through this building from the universe, just from the universe. We're not free of that stuff. So we're always getting low levels of that. As atoms decay, just generally, sometimes some atoms just shoot off an electron or whatever. That's what I'm talking about here. That's a radiation in general. So you might have learned a little bit about this in chemistry. When you look on the periodic table of elements, we have some examples of atoms that are going to be more likely to be radioactive, and they have the radioactive symbol on them. That's the 3 sort of round triangles on them. And they are going to be willingly able to shoot off electrons in this type of radiation. This is ionizing radiation there. And they often will decay to other types of atoms if they're able to shoot off things like their protons and stuff like that as well, because they don't always just shoot off electrons. And if they shoot off enough electrons, they can actually start changing what type of atom they are, which is, for example, I believe it's plutonium that decays to lead or something like that. It's like plutonium and then uranium and then lead or something like that. That it will gradually decay down to. And we think that all of the lead on the entire planet Earth used to be plutonium. There's evidence of that, which is kind of crazy. And that might be where other elements in the periodic table even came from, was decaying of radioactive elements of other kinds, just due to all the energy in the universe. But that's getting super meta. My point is, ionizing radiation is something around us all the time, and we found a way to basically use it to our advantage to get rid of microbes, cause enough damage to the microbes, and then keep them from being able to multiply. So now we have the ability to sterilize things that can't withstand the heat or the moisture. Make sense? It would kill you, though. So UV radiation, ultraviolet radiation, we know we get it from the sun, yes, but we can also use it, and you've seen it. If you ever seen the purple light on, that's ultraviolet, black lights or ultraviolet radiation, okay? Yes, and so UV sterilizers, whether it's on fish tanks or whether it's on even water purification like RO filtration systems can also have UV lights in them. We also have UV lights in like BSL-3 and BSL-4, like those hoods. And we have one in the microbiology lab, one of those hoods, those vent hoods, and we can turn on UV light. UV light is great for sterilizing things that it can penetrate through, which is very few things. So you can usually just have tinting on your window in your car, and that will prevent UV light from being able to get through. It can get through clear things like glass and water, but it can't get through anything that has any substance to it. So it can sterilize, but it's not good at penetrating things. So if you're trying to sterilize a surface or if you're trying to treat water, if you treat it with UV light long enough, you could potentially sterilize, but it doesn't penetrate surfaces. That's the drawback of UV radiation. UV radiation is also non-ionizing radiation. It doesn't typically cause ions to form when it hits the things. What it does do is excite chemical bonds. So if you have a DNA sequence that is like A, T, T, C, G, A, whatever it is, and you have two T's next to each other, if ultraviolet light hits those two T's, it'll cause them to bind next to each other instead to the A's across from them. So instead of having hydrogen bonds across from them, they'll covalently bond next to each other. And then whenever that cell needs to multiply again, because cells don't live forever, they just need to multiply sometimes. That cell is dying and it needs to make a copy of itself to propagate itself. Now no longer can we get the T to match with an A on the other side. We'll separate the DNA and try to match up A's to T's and C's to G's. The T's won't want to bind with A's anymore. And so what does your body do to try to fix that? Your body has mechanisms to actually cut out the two T's and replace it with new code. Sometimes it gets it wrong, or sometimes it can't fix that in time for the cell cycle to occur. And so that will lead to mutations in your cells, which can lead to cancer. So that's how melanoma is formed. So your body will say, if I've had to repair this enough times, we're going to create a molecule that should help us from having this damage occur again. And that is melanin. So your body produces melanin to try to absorb UV radiation so that your DNA doesn't have to. Some people are born with more melanin than others naturally. So they have natural protection against that sort of damage. However, anybody can get enough of that damage that can eventually lead to cancer and disruption of the cell cycle. And it often can present much, much later in time. So that's a big issue as well. All right. Any questions about UV or anything like that? Yes.
So UV radiation would kill endospores?
It can if we do it for a long enough period of time, and as long as we're not trying to penetrate a surface. Potentially it could. But again, we don't usually use UV radiation like that at the level that could kill an endospore. Now, if I'm doing a sterilizing cabinet that I'm doing all my samples in, and I'm going to turn on UV light at the right wavelengths, and I'm doing it for at least 30 minutes to an hour, then it will sterilize the surfaces that are exposed to the light.
So I should kind of notate it like sterilization with have an asterisk by it.
Yes,
Okay.
it has to be certain things. And a lot of the stuff in this chapter is like that, right? So we can sterilize with certain chemicals and stuff like that if we have we're using them correctly, the right amount of time, the right concentration. That's how a lot of our chemicals are in this chapter too. All right, so we're gonna move on. Any other questions about the radiation stuff? All right. There are no liquid cleaners that can achieve sterilization. Is this true or false? So Mariah, I'm going to ask you a question about this one. Give me an example of a liquid cleaner. That's going to be my question to you. This should be an easy one. That should be an easy question. Oh, well, this way I'm glad that this doesn't count for grade. People get kicked out. So this is false. There are liquid cleaners that can achieve sterilization. Mariah is going to give us an example of a liquid cleaner here in a little bit. But this is going to get us into our chemicals. So Megan, you're going to give me an example of a halogen. We've already talked about one of them, but you'll give me an example of a halogen. My Sharice here today. I don't know. She might be online. Chlorine or iodine. Those will both work. Is my Sharice online today? I don't think she did. All right. I'm having a moment right now. Okay. Esther, you're going to give me an example of a specific aldehyde. Aldehyde. There's several of them that the chapter talks about, but we'll talk about one of the aldehydes. All right. There's always some that I forget about. Because I could ask about alcohols, but I feel like those are too easy of a question. The phenolics, I feel like confuse people, but I'll ask about that one. Let's see who I want to ask about. Next person, because my Sharice wasn't here, right? Kristen, I'll have you give me an example of a phenolic. You guys,
so sorry.
phenolic, Phenolic. Aldehyde, yeah. We'll do those. There's other ones too that we'll get to eventually, but those, you guys can cook with those. So, I got Megan's sheet papers. Okay. So we're gonna get into some of our chemicals, and many of these chemicals can be in liquid form. So Megan told us about chlorine and iodine. So those are halogens, and some of those could be technically in liquid form. Yes, bleach, disinfectant spray, both of those are fine. That's fine. And we're just getting to this idea of starting to think about that. So bleach too would fall into the halogen category because it is a chloride-based chemical. So many of our halogen category guys can sterilize. They can. But again, it comes down to they have to be at the right concentration. You have to expose the item long enough. And there can't be, usually organic matter can interfere with that sort of stuff. What do I mean by organic matter? Does anybody know what I mean by that? Poop, pee, blood, pus, all that stuff. So all those things are organic matter. So those can water down the solution or they can chemically interact with the solution. So now it can't chemically interact with the microbes that's supposed to be controlling.
Bleach in the bathroom, it doesn't do any good.
So it can. So if it depends on the concentration. So if you are using liquid bleach that we are watering down according to like the black of the bottle or whatever, typically it disinfects and it's very good at disinfecting. I don't want to like discourage you from doing it. And it's one of the best disinfectants that we have. It's extremely effective. And if it's concentrated enough, it can get rid of the endospores. But we don't necessarily need to sterilize our bathroom, right? But it disinfects very well and it's affordable. It disinfects better than vinegar does. But vinegar is less toxic, and I think we know that, right? But generally speaking, the more toxic something is, also the more effective it is at sterilizing and stuff like that.
Mechanically remove the visible contaminants and then use
And you guys know this, right? Yeah, and you guys generally know that. Like, what is it better? Like, if you had somebody pooped everywhere in a bathroom, should you remove the poop and then clean it? Probably it'll work better that way. If you just straight up start using bleach on poop, it's just gonna smear the poop around and then that. So yes, so I would say, mechanical decontamination and then using a chemical disinfectant on that, and you're gonna get it clean that way. There are some chemicals that actually sterilize, and some of them, the chlorines and things like that, at certain concentrations and certain formulas of them, you can actually sterilize. Iodine is one of them that can sterilize at certain concentrations, but it's also very toxic. And some people can actually be allergic to iodine as well. So there's an issue with that too. So those are our halogens. I keep looking at the periodic table. You guys might even see me looking over there because I keep looking over there. The second row over. So we see the far right is helium, neon, argon, krypton, xenon, radon. Those guys. Those are our noble gases. Okay. Next to them, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine, whatever AT is, I don't know. Those are our halogens. Okay. Those are all halogens. And halogens are pretty electronegative, and that's part of how they work. So they can actually steal electrons and stuff like that from people. Fluorine is actually more electronegative than oxygen is. So that's why we have fluoride in our toothpaste, because it actually works pretty well to affect microbes. Now, fluoride doesn't work that well to penetrate. It can actually be affected by organic matter. So if you have a biofilm on your teeth, then we need to break up the biofilm for the fluoride to be able to work. And that's why toothpaste isn't just fluoride straight up. It's got surfactants and detergents in there to help break up biofilms and stuff like that. And then the fluoride can do its job to protect that way. So you guys know fluoride. We know it's in our water, but it's also in our toothpaste. You might have mouthwashes with fluoride in them too. Chlorine, we see it in our pools a lot to keep them clean and microbe free. Your water is often treated with chloride as well to kill microbes. Bromine is usually used, we use it a lot in science, but you can also use it in hot tubs because it's less likely to evaporate out of the hot tub. Iodine, we know we can use that as, like we've already said previously, as an aseptic or antiseptic. Those words are often interchangeable, by the way. So the iodine can be used on skin if you're not allergic to it as a means to control microbes there. You can use it for IV prep as well, especially if you're starting a central line. You might want to use something that's more effective than just alcohol, right? So we can often use iodine to prep for central lines, as well as hopefully that we have an example of a phenolic soon we can talk about that. Aldehydes. What's an example of an aldehyde, Esther? Yeah, yes, and it's not meant to be a trick. Yeah, so formaldehyde. We also have glutaraldehyde. And so those are commonly used in embalming, right? And that's meant to preserve the body so that it doesn't rot, so that you can get it to a viewing. For example, some of them have a stronger smell than others. So glutaraldehyde is usually used in preparing bodies for viewings and things like that, whereas formaldehyde is often more commonly used for preserving bodies for things like dissection. It's longer term. It's more toxic. Formaldehyde is. Formalin is the aqueous version, the water-based version of formaldehyde. Okay. So, anyways, there's that. Okay, I'm trying to think of another one. Shelby here today? Shelby, yes. Okay, I'll hear Shelby. You'll give me an example of an oxidative thing. We'll come back to you for that. Oxidative. Or oxidizer. There's oxidation happening. There's one in particular that is more commonly used. There it is, hydrogen peroxide, beautiful. So oxidizers like hydrogen peroxide, often they do the same thing. We learned about it in previous chapters. You guys remember the reactive oxygen species and how some of our bacteria have to be able to deal with oxygen and reactive oxygen species. That includes hydrogen peroxide. We have superoxide dismutase that turns superoxide into hydrogen peroxide. And then catalase can break down hydrogen peroxide into water and oxygen. So we can actually use hydrogen peroxide to kill anaerobic organisms. So it can commonly be used that way. In fact, hydrogen peroxide at high enough concentrations, usually higher than 6, but more commonly used at about 35%, can be vaporized and used to like treat whole like rooms or put something in a box and fill it with 35% hydrogen peroxide vapor. And then it'll treat something like an autoclave would, but without heat. And so if it can resist that oxidation process. So we often use that as a chemiclave, which is a chemical version of an autoclave. Okay. So those are oxidative guys. Kristen, do you have a phenolic for me? This one is a harder one for people, so.
No, it's, not sterilized.
Let you take a look. So I'll let you click with that one. I'll go back to. So we'll come back to the phenolics.
It's not cavicide, is it?
I don't, yes, so cavicide, so yes, so it's called clavinicide or something, I don't remember the exact word. That's an old school world.
Yeah.
For that particular, it's like clavinic acid or something like that, but we call it more commonly.
Because you can't just take the wipe out or spray and do it barehanded.
Right.
You have to have gloves on.
So yeah, that's a little bit stronger, yes. And so one of the ones that we've talked about previously, so I'll allow that. That one is an acid one that works, and it's kind of a similar concept, but it's a little bit different. So one that we have talked about in class actually was carbolic acid, which is what Joseph Lister used to treat his operating theaters. And so carbolic acid is also known as phenol. And so phenol is actually pretty toxic. It's pretty toxic. We don't use it a lot anymore as straight up phenol. Now there are products that are related to phenol. If you guys remember, you learned about this in organic chemistry. If you took GOB, you did learn about this. Phenol. Actually, I don't know why I don't just draw it on here. Phenol looks like this. You have your hexagon, you have your alternating double bonds, and then one of these has an OH. This is phenol. Okay. Now, phenol, we have chemicals that are derived from phenol. If it is derived from phenol and it has this general structure involved in it, we call them phenolics. One of the most commonly used in medicine, phenolics, is chlorhexidine. You've heard of it and you've probably used it. Yes. Yes, it's an antiseptic. All right, so chlorhexidine, and it is clear. And you often use, and you can also use chlorhexidine for, combine it with a detergent, and then the detergent will make surgical scrub, like whenever you're prepping for surgery. Okay, so surgical scrub, the brand name for one that we use for that a lot is Hibiclens. So Hibiclens, and there's another brand that I can't ever remember the name of, Provone or something like that. Anyways, those guys have chlorhexidine and a detergent. So we're combining a phenolic, which is based off of phenol, with a detergent. So we're getting that mechanical removal of the microbes. We're breaking down their membranes, which is what a lot of our surfactants do, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then we're also getting the phenolic action in there. They do not sterilize. None of them do, but they are very toxic. So they work very well for, as an antiseptic. Okay. So chlorhexidine is the best example of that one probably. All right. Any questions about those chemicals? There were other chemicals I know that we talked about, but I'm just trying to get like a lot of our basics out of the way there. Let's move on. Delete this.
Is that blue? Or-
It's clear. It's clear.
It can be blue too.
Is it? I mean,
Use it for cold sterile. Is that cold sterile?
all right. Isopropyl alcohol is preferred over ethyl alcohol for asepsis. This is one that trips a lot of people up because they'll have arguments with me about this. But now for asepsis, which one works better? That's what the question is asking. Is isopropyl alcohol, does it work better than ethyl alcohol? It does work better. So it's actually more effective as an antiseptic or aseptic. It's actually why we still use isopropyl alcohol in the little squares of the prep pads before you start IVs or draw tubes or something like that, okay? So we use isopropyl alcohol still for that because it is more effective than ethyl alcohol. Now, not by a ton, but by enough. It's also cheaper, but it also evaporates faster. So it's actually part of the process with alcohols. Okay, yeah, so my question for you is, what percentage of alcohol is the most effective? Yes. We'll ask you that because I was about to get into that anyway. So what percentage of alcohol is the most effective? You don't have to explain why because I'll go into that, but yes. So there is an issue with that. And if you're wondering why I'm asking that, and wondering, how many of us watched the lecture beforehand like we're supposed to. So yes, I'll ask you that question. 70%, beautiful, excellent. So if you need to go, you can go. Okay. I'm assuming that was Victoria. Was that Victoria? I'm assuming that was Victoria. I don't know. It's either Victoria or. All right. Yes, so that was back at what we were talking about previously. So 70% alcohol works better than 100% alcohol. This is because you've got that 30% water to help with the coagulating of proteins. Alcohols work by disrupting the cell membrane, disrupting the cell wall, and if you have water added in, coagulating protein. So they are pretty good for antisepsis. The evaporation process helps work with breaking down the cell wall. If you don't fully evaporate, you haven't actually disinfected appropriately. So if you're ever prepping an arm for an IV, make sure it actually dries before you stick. Now you don't want to leave it for too long, but you don't want to just make sure it's wet and then stick through the wetness. It hasn't done its job with cleaning. So it does need to dry before we stick through it. So I'm actually pretty much a very big stickler for that because I worked in phlebotomy for so long. We've always prepped with alcohol. And I would see people like wipe an arm and then go in and stick. And I'm like, I'm not even gonna let that dry first. Like that's part of the process with how it works. So we want to be sure that if you guys are doing that, starting your IVs, prep it, give it 30 seconds to dry, and then stick it. Just give it more, and you're less likely to have complications with your patients later on if you do something like that. So that'll help with that. Yes, so isopropyl works better than ethyl alcohol. So you guys probably don't remember it, and you're probably going to hate that I'm bringing it up. But in organic chemistry, you learned about these molecules in organic chemistry, and you learned them as methyl, ethyl, propyl, and butyl. You guys remember this in Dr. Tim's class? They probably hate me for bringing it up. Methyl means you have one carbon. Okay, I already put it up. One carbon. Ethyl means you have two. Propyl means you have three, and butyl means you have four. Ethyl alcohol, also known as ethanol, okay, has two carbons. One carbon, two carbon. And we have an OH group. That's the alcohol group. If you put the OH group on the other carbon, it's the same. So it's just ethanol. Propanol has two different versions it can have. If I put the OH group on one of the end carbons, then whatever carbon has the group on it, we would say is the one or the two or whatever. So it just depends on whatever we're talking about. But because this carbon is in the middle, it can't be the one or the two. You don't start numbering 1, 2, 3. You number from an end if it has a group on the end. So this is also known as 2 propanol. But we've also called it isopropanol because no matter what way you flip it, it's an isomer, like it's the same. It's isometric. So it's isopropanol. That's what it is. And so those are the difference. We have an extra carbon group in here, and this has the OH group in the middle. If we have it on the end, it would be called 1-propanol. Okay, and it's not isopropanol, it should be 1-propanol. Okay, so that's organic chemistry. Me refreshing you on that and what the difference is between these molecules. Isopropanol works better than ethyl alcohol. Okay, and it has to deal with how many carbons are in there and how they interact with other molecules. It also evaporates faster, which is kind of a problem because you're not getting as much exposure time. So if you have to spread it over a lot of something, then that could cause a problem with how fast it evaporates. But if we're using it in small areas like a prep on an arm or something, that's not going to be an issue. But we don't like to use it for large areas. It also, because it evaporates so quickly, the bigger issue with evaporating quickly is that it can dry out the skin. So the faster it evaporates, the more likely it's going to take moisture from the skin too. So even though isopropyl alcohol works better, ethyl alcohol won't dry out the skin as much. So if you're repeatedly using hand sanitizer like we have been since COVID, that's why we made the switch. And you might not have noticed it, but me being old enough and being somebody who was a big fan of Bath and Body Works hand sanitizer before COVID, and then, after COVID, you may have noticed that we made a shift from having hand sanitizer that was based in isopropanol. Now most hand sanitizers are based in ethyl alcohol. That's because we were using hand sanitizer so much that our hands were drying out and cracking, and then you're susceptible to infections from the cracks in your skin. So ethyl alcohol reduced that risk because it doesn't evaporate as quickly. It doesn't work as well, but it works well enough, and it protects you from your hands cracking and things.
A lot of people were getting sick too because they were using too much of it, like
Mhm.
taking the good bacteria off. would be-
Yes. So taking the good bacteria off, our good bacteria are there to be, now I have to use it because I'm thinking about it. The good bacteria are there for microbial antagonisms. We don't want to get rid of all the good bacteria. We don't want to sterilize our hands. You also don't want to dry out the skin on your hands and then make it. So anyways, you can also smell the difference. To me, I feel like ethyl alcohol has more of a smell like a drinking alcohol does than isopropyl alcohol, which has a different kind of smell to it. So anyways, so there's that. So good job. We want the water in there because it is effective.
And people were drinking.
Yes, they were. You much to try to tell people not to. All right, which of the following is not a halogen? Not a halogen. I actually have the thing that is not the halogen drawn on the board here. All right. This is ethylene oxide. So iodine and fluoride obviously are over there in our halogens up there. Chlorine is what's in bleach. And so that's also a halogen. Okay. So our non-halogen is ethylene oxide. Ethyl, 2 carbons, and this is what it looks like. A little triangle with an O in it. We draw it without the carbons drawn in there, and you would see it like this. That's the structure for it. Looks like the Illuminati or something. So this is ethylene oxide. So ethylene oxide is used as a gas to sterilize like whole rooms, even buildings. It's what the CDC uses to sterilize their BSL-4 labs. They keep 4 labs all the time. 2 of them are usually being sterilized, and 2 of them are active. And so one of them they're actually using, and one of them is a backup lab. So they don't use the backup lab unless they have to go to the backup lab. And then they'll go through a period of time, 3 to 6 months, unless there's some sort of event that they need to sterilize that room. And they will just literally switch to the other labs and then sterilize the other 2. And then just keep that on cycle, and they'll just repeat that over and over again. Because they work with live Ebola and things like that in those labs. And so they can't have it building up in there or the likelihood of it being spread out. They also wear those suits, you guys have seen it, where they pump air into it so air always flows out and can't get into the suits. And then they also have to take a hot shower in phenol whenever they go in and out of the rooms so that they aren't going to be transmitting it outside of those laboratories. So pretty cool stuff. I got to tour that lab when they were building it, so it was a pretty cool thing. But ethylene oxide is used to sterilize those whole rooms. But the problem with ethylene oxide is that it's carcinogenic, it's flammable, and it's also explosive. And so it's very toxic. It's a bad deal. It's very effective. But if you're going to be using it, you have basically to treat that air before you release it back into the environment to burn it off. and then release it back into the environment. So it's pretty dangerous. It's not one we use a lot, but it can sterilize whole rooms. It's pretty cool. All right, then we have multi-select again, select all that apply. Which are the most difficult pathogens to eliminate completely? I have one on here that I didn't mean to select on here, so that's my fault. One of these should be the answer, but I messed it up. That was my fault. The most difficult one of these choices. Forgot to change out for. All right. All right, endospores. Endospores is the answer. I put gram-negative, I didn't mean to, so that's my fault on there. That was me setting up the question incorrectly. So it's gonna be like this. Prions are definitely the most difficult one, but we don't see them a lot. They're super rare. They just are, okay? So we don't usually prepare for them. Next is endospores. Then it's gonna be some of the gram-negative and some of the gram-positive bacteria. That kind of just depends on the bacteria and what it has going on. Probably the most resistant is gonna be our acid-fast bacteria, which are gram-positives. Then most of the gram-negatives, and then some of the gram-positives, and then the rest of the gram-negatives. It just depends on the species and what they do normally. So they can kind of be interchangeable. Then we have the non-envelope viruses. Then the envelope ones are the easiest to get rid of. Okay. That's generally how it's laid out. There's a lot of gray crossover, but the endospores by far the hardest to get rid of. Last question for this chapter, how do surfactants work? So for the purposes of this course, for our practice, surfactants and detergents are interchangeable terms. Okay? It's not true at a chemical level, but it's close enough.
So detergent and what?
Surfactants. All right, so if you have the cell wall membrane, the membrane. We've seen this a million times. We call this the lipid bilayer, right? What's really going on here, I'm not going to draw the whole thing, okay, but you get the idea that it's all like this. One of these, if we blow it up, is actually a PO4 phosphate, right? That's the head, and it's attached to a couple of hydrocarbon chains. Hydrocarbon chains are also hydrophobic, right? Water bearing. So we've got a charged head and hydrophobic tails. This is an amphipathic molecule. We've learned about this previously, all right? So these are all negatively charged guys. They'd rather hang out with each other than with the hydrophobic group, which is why they group up like this in our phospholipid bilayer. But what negative charged guys really want to hang out with are positively charged guys. So there are some molecules that we have made that look like phospholipids, but with a positive charge. So they really easily sneak in between our phospholipids. These guys are known as quaternary ammonia compounds, or quats. Okay. The quaternary ammonia compounds, because nitrogen bound to 4 things always has a positive charge. And it's bound to, I don't know, hydrogens and other stuff. And then a long group that's often a hydrocarbon tail. So this is how it mimics. So it has a positive head so that the lipid bilayer will be like, oh yeah, come hang out with us. We're so happy to see you. We haven't seen a positive in a while. You come hang out with us. And it comes in there and says, thanks guys, and pushes it apart. And so now you are opening up the membrane and creating all these holes in it. Now by itself, this isn't super effective at killing or controlling microbes, but it can open up the cells. Now other chemicals can get into the cells. And so it usually works with other things. They also are able to create something that you probably learned about in chemistry that looks like this. And whatever, we'll do this in a big old circle and all the tails are on the inside. Anybody know what this structure is called? We have all the tails like this, and we can actually have this form and then contain like debris or dirt or whatever like that. It's called a micelle. So micelles can form like this. And so this is how we actually mechanically remove debris. And so surfactants work by creating micelles to help remove debris or binding with charged or even uncharged molecules to help physically remove them from a surface, but also by breaking down our membranes. So surfactants, which are the primary ingredient in detergents, work like that to remove things. Yes.
Okay, so don't we have surfactant in our lungs?
Yes.
And so is that similar?
It works. It has the exact same function naturally for you to help remove debris from your lungs.
Okay.
Yes, and to break down microbes in your lungs as well. Yeah.
My turn. Like the surfactant.
Yes, and it just helps with removal of debris in their lungs. Yes. Yeah. So, so it can work like with washing your hands, which is the most common way we think of soap has surfactants in it, right? We know that. So this can work that way, or it can work with inside of your body as well, like what they do in pulmonary medicine to help from bacteria being able to take adhesion to your lungs and stuff like that. So, yeah. All right. Those are surfactants, and they are the primary ingredient in detergents. All right. Here's our happy little podium, and then we're going to move on to the drugs. Mariah, I asked Mariah a question. That's right. Okay, yes, cool. Yes, awesome. Okay, got Mariah. Pop up with the thing. Chapter 12. So chapter 12 is our antibiotics. And I will be creating a list of all the antibiotics you need to know so that you'll at least have the list and you can know that you know those. And I won't ask outside of that list. But it is almost all of them. I'm not going to lie. Okay. In my lecture, if I covered it, then you can get tested over it. All right. Before we go on to that, our activity for chapter 11 talked about quaternary ammonium disinfectants. What aspect of cells do the quats affect? The cell membrane. If quaternary ammonia compounds can't sterilize, why would we still use them in hospital settings? Because they are good at helping other disinfectants work better. And they're better at helping other chemicals penetrate cells and things like that. They improve the effectiveness of other chemicals. And they're also non-toxic to us, generally speaking. So it's a useful way of disinfecting. You can't sterilize, you're right, but sometimes we don't need to sterilize things. And the chapter talked about that too, how we will grade certain instruments and things that we use in hospital settings as like high priority or middle priority, intermediate, or low priority items, whether they need to be sterilized or whether disinfection is appropriate, stuff like that. For example, doorknobs. Do we need to sterilize a doorknob? Not really. It's probably more fine just to disinfect it. But if we're using a surgical scalpel, we want that to be sterile. So it usually just depends on what types of tissues we're coming into contact with. In microbial control, tolerance refers to microbes being able to transiently survive lethal treatment with antimicrobial compounds. Resistance means you have a heritable trait that allows you to survive. Why is that difference important? Well, if you're tolerant to something, you just have some sort of natural thing to you because you just are able to survive this thing chemically, then that, we might not be able to control that all the way. But if it is resistant, then you have genetic traits. Those traits could be passed on to other bacteria, and that could lead to spread and propagation of those traits, and that's a bigger concern. What are potential consequences of improper dilution or improper application of disinfectants? So this is kind of what we were talking about. If you're just smearing a poop pile down with bleach, is that really going to sterilize that situation? No. And so we want to be sure that we're following the directions, using the right concentrations and stuff like that to be able to kill the appropriate populations you're trying to target, and being mindful of the settings and how you're using those things. Why might biofilms be more difficult to eliminate with certain chemical disinfectants? Because we have to be able to penetrate deeper levels of the biofilm in order to actually treat those microbes, which is why we have surfactants in toothpaste to help break down the biofilms. And then the fluoride can do its job. Otherwise, we might not be getting in there in that. And so whenever you brush your teeth, we're often breaking down the biofilms on the surface of your teeth. But are we breaking down the biofilms between your teeth? No, that's why flossing is important, my lovelies. So if flossing will get in there in between the teeth where your surfactant isn't breaking down all those biofilms. So now the fluoride can get it in there better and do its job. So that is why, most dentists and most anybody that knows anything about microbes would say you should floss before you brush your teeth so that the fluoride can get in between your teeth. Or if you're using mouthwash, floss before you're using the mouthwash, for example. Okay. Cool. So we'll move on to our other Kahoots. Make sure we're signed in here. So my Sharice wasn't here and she wasn't online, correct? I just wanted to double check it. Who is this other Zoom user on here? If you guys are online here. I've got Jessica on here, I see, and there's somebody else that says Zoom user. I don't know who it is. All right, cool. Let's get going with this one. We've still got Braley, Morgan, Adolfo, and Hannah. All right, what is selective? I think it's Hannah, the other Zoom user. What is selective toxicity? There's three major concepts in this chapter that are related, but are slightly different from one another, and we'll go over them. So selective toxicity is more of a concept, and it's the idea that you guys generally got this. We want to cause damage to the bad guy, the pathogen, and not to the host. We want it to be, actually, let me be more specific here. I want to be toxic. Toxic to pathogen, not host, not the patient. All right, so there's another concept in here called therapeutic index. The most important aspect of therapeutic index is that is a ratio. It is a ratio of the effective dose versus the dose that is toxic, so toxic dose. And then we have therapeutic window. And it is related to index, but it's not the ratio, it is the actual difference. Between the effective dose and the toxic. So what am I talking about here? So the concept is that you want the drug to be killing the bad guy and not the patient. Many of our drugs at some dose will cause some sort of toxicity to our patients. This is just fact, okay? Either how the patient's body breaks it down, it makes toxic products, or the drug itself is just toxic, or the microbe and how it's affected can cause toxicity. So, or you can be allergic to the drug. All those things will be considered toxic to the patient. So you ideally want a drug that is completely toxic and kills a pathogen, but doesn't affect your patient negatively at all. If we're looking at a ratio, if you can have 100 milligrams of a drug is whenever it is toxic to the patient. But at 5 milligrams of the drug, it kills the pathogen, kills the bacteria, for example. All right, the ratio between those, the ratio 100 over 5, or actually we usually do it the other way, 5 over 100. Okay. So again, the ratio of the effective dose versus the toxic dose. Okay. So it's usually the ratio of those two things. So the closer that, so it's usually going to be well below 1. So 5 over 100, that's much less than 1. So 0.05. The closer you get to 1. So if it's toxic at 6 milligrams, but it's effective at 5, that's getting pretty close to 1. The closer you are to 1, the more you're in the danger zone, right? And then that difference between the two, the difference between 100 and 5, that gives us a 95 milligram therapeutic window that we can work within here. But if it was 6 versus 5, that would give you a 1 milligram window within which you could work. Make sense? So that's the difference between those numbers there, right? The concept is called selective toxicity. But when you start talking about the ratio, that's the therapeutic index. The difference is the therapeutic window. Okay? You guys will talk about this more in actual practice. All right. Choose all that apply. What types of organisms can antibiotics treat? Braley, what do we call a drug that treats a viral infection? It's not meant to be a trick question. It's meant to be kind of straightforward. So antibiotics treat bacteria. Antifungals treat fungi. Stuff like the antiprotozoal treat protozoa and etc. So what kind of drugs treat viruses, Braley?
Antiviral.
There we go. Yes, and it's meant to be straightforward like that. So antibiotic is the only one that's off. You'll just have to remember anti-B means anti-B, biotic, bacteria. Okay, so antibiotics only treat bacterial infections. Okay. We are going to talk about some drugs that cross. There's one drug in particular that we use to treat more than just one poop, and that's metronidazole. Metronidazole is what I say, the azole that went to the big metro. And it went to the big metro because it doesn't just treat fungi like most of the other azoles do. Most of the other azoles, miconazole, ketoconazole, fluconazole, most of the azoles treat fungal infections. There's two deviants. One of them is sulfamethoxazole. Well, sulfamethoxazole has sulfa and meth in it. Those we're going to focus on the folic acid synthesis drug. If it has sulfa in it, sulfa drugs target the folic acid synthesis pathway. So it's one azole that deviated. The other azole that deviated is metronidazole. When I'm telling you, there's so many drugs in this chapter, you're going to need little weird tricks like this to help you divide them out from one another. But metronidazole is an azole that sometimes treats fungal infection, sometimes treats bacterial infections, and sometimes treats protozoal infection. It just depends on the infection and the application. The one thing about metronidazole that is commonly used for is for anaerobic environments. So if the patient has an infection in an environment that isn't exposed to oxygen, we can often reach for metronidazole to treat it. We're talking about BV, bacterial vaginosis. Vagina doesn't have a lot of oxygen in it. We're talking about gut infections. The gut doesn't have a lot of oxygen in it. Oxygen inhibits metronidazole from being able to work. So that's why it's only used in anaerobic situations. We often combine it with other drugs too. So originally, it's most commonly used as an amoebicide, which is a antiprotozoal drug.
You can't leave the hospital for a couple of days after being on. That's through IV.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how they're like, I don't know that stuff. I can tell you what group it falls into if you tell me its name. Yeah.
But you have to be under.
Let's say that there are many antibiotics that they're
Well, I
so
think-
toxic
I
to the
think it
patient, they
treats
have to be
more.
monitored. So vancomycin is one of those. What
I
was it?
think it might treat MRSA or something like that.
So it's probably vancomycin. So vancomycin is one of those drugs that's so toxic to our patient, you have to be monitored while you're on it. And then after you come off of it, monitor your blood level of vancomycin just to be sure that it has been metabolized by your system before we'll let you leave the hospital because it's so toxic to the kidneys and the liver and stuff like that. So vancomycin might be the one that you're talking about with that. Vanc is pretty rough. All right, multi-select. Which antibiotics affect the cell wall? You're going to have so many questions like this on the Unit 3 exam, it's going to make your head spin. So many just like this. We're almost done. Cell wall inhibiting guys. So we have several groups of antibiotics. First one that we're going to talk about are the ones that inhibit the cell wall. These are all the cillins and other beta-lactam type of drugs. The beta-lactams include cephalosporin type antibiotics and carbapenems. Other ones that fall into the cell wall category are vancomycin, bacitracin, and isoniazid. Vancomycin is a mycin. Most other mycins fall into the protein inhibiting category, but not vanco. Vanco is a cell wall inhibitor. Okay. Bacitracin is found in Neosporin. You guys know triple antibiotic cream. So we'll come back to other ones that fall into that category as well. Ones that inhibit, what do I want to do next? Folic acid synthesis. Folic acid inhibitors. These are all the sulfas and things that have the word meth. Like we think, what I'm thinking of is methane. Methane is a stinky gas. Sulfur is stinky. So I think of the stinky antibiotics being in this category, which is how I remember it. But if it has sulfa, or we also have trimethoprim. Trimeth, three meth, stinky. So I put it in that category, okay? These, like I said, that's weird, but that's how I remember it, the stinky drugs. They might not actually smell stinky, but they kind of do actually if you smell them. But yeah, so they are my stinky drugs. Next, 3, protein synthesis inhibitors. These usually inhibit ribosomes. These are often going to be aminoglycosides or macrolides. Many of these guys end in mycin, or they are tetracycline, or things that are related to tetracycline, the cyclins, like doxycycline or glycylcycline. Okay. Like I said, most of the mycins, obviously vancomycin was the one that is the cell wall. V is sort of like a W, so think of wall, I guess, I don't know. 2 V's makes a W, wall, I don't know, whatever helps you remember that, right? All right, then we have the ones that inhibit DNA replication or RNA transcription. These guys literally block helicase. So remember, our DNA is in a helix. You have to unwind it in order to open it to either replicate it or transcribe it. If you can't unwind DNA to open it up, you can't replicate or transcribe. So these guys often block helicase. So you can't do either of those things. So the drugs that fall into this category are known as fluoroquinolones. An example of these are the fluoxetins. So the group is the fluoroquinolones, and then the drugs themselves will have fluoxetine in the name. So ciprofloxacin, levofloxacin. Okay. So I expect you to know any fluoxetine in that category. Then our 5th group are the ones that affect the cell membrane. Oh, some examples of the mycin: erythromycin, streptomycin, neomycin. Forgot about that guy. Obviously, neomycin is in neosporin. All right, cell membrane affecting guys, there's 2 of them that we need to know. This is polymyxin and daptomycin. I don't know how to tell you because it's another mycin. How to remember that this one is not a protein inhibitor. But these guys affect the cell membrane, and they're often used in situations where you have biofilms as well. Okay. So polymyxin, neomycin, and bacitracin, they target the membrane, the protein synthesis, and the cell wall. 3 different aspects of bacteria are found in triple antibiotic cream. So pretty effective there. We don't want to encourage resistance. So that's why they say don't use it unless you actually need it. Okay. That's my little review of the antibiotics. We'll do one more question before we go to lab, because like I said, this kind of question, super common on the exam, where I will say, which of these antibiotics affect the cell wall? And I'll have a list of antibiotics, and you need to know which of those antibiotics affects the cell wall. Very common type of question on the exam. So we'll do one more of those. I'm going to leave my notes up. Oh, we'll do 2 more just to be safe. Which of these affects the ribosome or protein production? And if I didn't get to you today, but you were here today, I'm going to give you guys credit today. So Morgan was here today. Adolfo was here today. I think Hannah was online. I think that was Hannah. All right, so this one's the myosin, which in this case is going to be erythromycin. Okay, ketoconazole for the antifungals. That's right, I didn't do the antifungals. Why are you clicking on that? Ketoconazole for fungals, antifungals. These are the azoles and amphotericin B. We usually don't reach for amphotericin B unless the azoles didn't work. Okay? For the protozoa, these are going to be metronidazole, which we also use for any anaerobic infection. Including bacterial ones. So this is one that crosses over. It's not an antibiotic because it doesn't just treat bacteria. It's kind of a more broad spectrum drug, anti-germicide, whatever I'm going to call it, antimicrobial, we'll say. It's proper antimicrobial. It crosses several groups. So fungi, protozoa, and this, but what's commonly used to treat amoebic infections, which are protozoa. So it's a little bit of a deviant there, okay? And then our other one is the quinines and its derivatives. Derivatives include like chloroquine or primaquine. They all have quine at the end. And these are anti-malaria. Malaria is a protozoa. All right, and then we also have antihelminthics. The ones I'll test you on, I know there were 4 that were talked about in the chapter, but the ones I'll test you on will be pyrantel, praziquantel, and ivermectin. And then we have antivirals. The ones that we talked about in this chapter were any anti-HIV, which target either reverse transcriptase, protease, or integrase. We also have, there's 3 major ones. We have like Tamiflu. Please tell me that you know what that treats. Okay. I mean, it's in the name. This one is the giveaway, okay? And then we have another one, which is acyclovir and its derivatives like valcyclovir. They're in the name too. Vir, viral, treats viruses, okay? These are used most commonly to treat herpes. Valcyclovir is Valtrex. Okay? But we can often use acyclovir and its derivatives for treating other DNA viruses as well. So it's not just only herpes, but most commonly used for herpes. It's a little bit more broad spectrum. Okay, this is my mini list. I'll put a more comprehensive list together for you guys later that I'll post on the announcements, okay? All right, any questions about this stuff? I know, like I said, 11 and 12 are some flashcard chapters. Flashcard them up. Be prepared for 15 and 16 and 17. They are not flashcard chapters and they are heavy. So when I say unit 3 is harder than unit 2, I'm not talking about 11, 12, or 18. 18 is like all review. It's stuff we've seen before. It's just categorizing stuff. Another flashcard chapter, okay? But 15, 16, and 17 are pretty heavy. So those are the ones that if you have to lean into some chapters, lean into 15 and 16, okay? All right, so we'll do 15 and 16 next Tuesday. We'll head to the lab now. It's gonna be an actual short day in lab today, okay? So see you guys up there in 10 minutes, 10 minutes. Short day in lab, even with everything we're doing. We're gonna go over the exam and we're gonna go over our unknown report things. And we're gonna do Graham stains today.